and everyone making this happen, Validated Labs. But again, especially you for making this happen. Without you, it wouldn't have been the same. So, any of you heard about Akasha before? Just wondering, a show of hands? 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay, that's okay. So Akasha as a word has roots in Sanskrit, and it means ether. And in this culture, ether was seen as some sort of metaphysical internet of consciousness, connecting humanity with itself and infinite knowledge. So quite an awesome term. And it also stands as an acronym for Advanced Knowledge Architecture for Social Human Advocacy. And this is a bit later, we will tie into the presentation done by Martin and Gotthold. So moving on. What we wanted to achieve with Akasha is a BitTorrent-like alternative in a world of Napster-like social networks. So whereas in the Napster scenario, you had a server somewhere and people connecting to the server, putting MP3 files. Today, in social media, we have a server somewhere, well, data centers and all that. But the idea is the same, just that the MP3 files are now pictures, messages, and things you share with your loved ones. But ultimately, this was about showcasing the potential. So after I co-founded Ethereum, I wanted to actually implement something to showcase its potential as a way to solve all problems that weren't solvable before. And in this case, what we set our sights on was to create a shared and persistent information commons. Probably you already start to see how everything ties together with the previous presentation. So, and in the process of building this infrastructure, we can regain our collective memory and freedom of expression, because basically we find ourselves now in a really bad situation where we have collectively outsourced this freedom of expression in the hands of a few companies that are really big. And in this context, how we could place Akasha compared to the classic networks is the classic server, nodes connecting to it, and in the alpha, by the way, the project started in 2015 after the Genesis launch of the Ethereum network, and in May we unveiled it. And until then, we have worked on creating a bundled application, easy to install and use for the users, that has an Ethereum node and an IPFS node. I'm not sure how much we can go into the IPFS, but what's important to remember is that you cannot store efficiently things on blockchain. For example, if we talk about pictures, videos, and so on, it's not scalable, it's not optimal. So IPFS is a complementary technology that solves this problem. So you can just put things on IPFS, you have the hash, and then you put that hash into a contract. So on-chain, you have just the pointer to the content. And in the beta, by the way, we just announced it publicly a couple of days ago, still fresh. One of the things that we will introduce in the future is also a web version, which will rely on a Web3 service provider as Mist, MetaMask, or Status in the future. But ultimately, by using smart contracts and IPFS in this configuration is a social network that has freedom of expression embedded in software. You cannot, not even us can control or take the content that was published by you. So in this case, obviously not good. In those cases, it's better. So the story began, as I said, on May 3rd, 2016, World Press Freedom Day. We announced that we are working on this, open the signups for the alpha. The response was very good, over 200 signups in the first 24 hours. By the end of the month, we had over 2,000. And it's worth mentioning that all these people found and joined the project organically. So there was zero paid advertising. All we did was publish a blog post, link it on Reddit, and tweet about it. That's all. Because ultimately, we felt that paying for advertising would taint the results. And we really wanted to understand if there's people interested in what we were building. We started to feel like in our own bubble. So 1 year after Ethereum, more precisely 1 year, 5 months, 18 days after the Genesis, we released the alpha called Into the Ether. And for us, it was a big moment for the first time, we actually deployed code, and we had people interacting with it. So it basically meant installing an application, synchronizing with the chain, and then from an interface that was easy to use, just publish content, using a publish button without opening command terminals and all the complicated stuff. Noob-friendly, let's say. And this is a preview of the interface we had in alpha, not very complex, but it has the basic functionalities as in exploring profiles, being able to send a tip to. By the way, that's an interesting side effect. Every identity is also a wallet because it's, it lives on the Ethereum blockchain. And as you see, the interface and the functionality is limited, but what we wanted to do is to have an MVP out there and see if everything can work as intended. And in here, but now moving on, the response from the community was very positive. As you can see above, Ronald, and a very complicated last name, was very excited to see a dApp that normal people can use. And that's precisely what we aim for. You don't need to be a blockchain expert. You just need to want to use decentralized apps. Ultimately, we proved that it is possible. So this, also in the process, we learned how we can improve things and what we can do better, thanks to the participation of all the alpha participants. And then 2 years after Ethereum, the Emergent, which is a couple of days ago just released, as I said, it's the beta version, which is the result of over a year of hard work on multiple levels. So we redesigned how the smart contracts work. We redesigned the way IPFS collects the resources, and I'm going to get into a bit of the lessons we learned. This is the tweet we launched, again, very well received. And one of the things was the most impactful from a user experience perspective was the loading time. It was slow, very slow. And this was due to the way we used to fetch resources from IPFS. And this is something you might also want to pay attention in case you will be building a prototype or something. If you try to get multiple IPFS resources at once, and one of the hashes will not respond for whatever reason, for example, the peer is down or inaccessible because of a firewall or so on, you would have to wait until the slowest hash is being resolved. And that's not optimal. Hopefully, you will learn from our mistake. And in the beta, we parallelized. This is a sneak peek at the beta interface we have in Akasha. And as you can see, we parallelized. Every resource is fetched separately. So you might want to keep that in mind in case it helps. And Akasha, it's as a social network, introduces a new way to organize the information. And I'm not sure if we'll have enough time. Hopefully, we will have to also show you a live demo of the application. But to tie in with the presentation we had before, the first token experiment we have chose to do inside the application is, as it says, our first experiment. So it's just a starting point, so to say. And the name of the token is AETH for now. And again, it's like a half-baked, let's say, or not finished idea. And it introduces, this is an ERC20 token, which is tradable and it can be sent from one address to another like any cryptocurrency in general. But the interesting part is that when locked, this token can periodically generate mana, which, from gaming, it can be used to interact inside the platform. So this introduces a system of checks and balances, theoretically, which should limit spam and introduce some sort of faucet or point that we can tweak in our crypto economic experiments. And then Essence is basically mana spent by users. Let's say I will actually go through a use case. Essence can be used to mint new AETH in existence. So in a sense, the way the participants in the network are being rewarded is through inflation, which is supported by all the participants in the economy. Just kind of an interesting thought, because all the participants in the economy, in theory, benefit from the newly generated information. And it should be a win-win scenario for everyone. And karma is a form of proto-reputation that tracks the positive contributions of the person, of the user inside the ecosystem. And now to briefly go through how the state transition happens and how it works. When the AETH is locked, the token, you receive mana, which then can be burned, as in I vote, I publish, I comment, and so forth, and can be collected by the author, right? And then when you collect that mana, you also receive separately karma. What's worth mentioning is that this whole right side is not transferable. So that's a token transferable. The only token transferable in all this is the AETH, the Akasha token, the first iteration. And as we briefly touched before, the essence can be used to convert to introduce new tokens in circulation. And this is again like an interesting facet that can be used inside the ecosystem, the cycling. So for example, the general assumption in crypto is that once you have a pot of money, people will try to game the system somehow, to find a vulnerability, to exploit it in some way. That's fun, depending on which side you are. And so in this case, this, just to give you an idea, the cycling period implies, in theory, again, a cost for the attacker. So let's say you have some entity that tries to buy a lot of AETH, so they can generate a lot of mana, so they can, manipulate or do something bad inside the ecosystem. Well, this cycling period in which the mana is reconverted into AETH that can be freely transferred should bring with it some penalties to the attacker. So in case the attacker manages somehow to harm the network, in theory, again, the price and the token will be affected. So himself, in the process of harming the token and the economy, he will also be harmed. So I know it's a work in progress. And this is a chart showing how the publisher now posts an entry, the reader can vote, and the voting process and the posting generates essence, which can now be collected by the publisher. This has some similarities, but it's not yet at the same point with what Martin and his colleague were presenting, but it is a start. And what we aim to do is to have I will get to that. So the part is that, Vitalik, which you guys don't know, is quite of a legend in this space, let's say, and he's one of the big picture thinkers, and not so long ago, he made a post in which he was basically talking about how a good token economy architecture requires more than just a way to introduce the tokens in circulation, which we kind of briefly touched upon before. And this information, this tweet, and how he tried to present it was digested by the media into the tokens that have been invented so far are token 1.0, in the sense that some of the tokens either don't have a good use case or are used just as a funding mechanism, which is not what this space should be when talking about innovation. But by the end of the day, we had this sort of big news today, everything you need to know about cryptocurrencies, and the quote that 90% of the token startups will fall. It's kind of alarming, but probably the number will go higher. And then the question is, how do we get to token 2.0? What can we learn? What can we adapt? And really how? So our, I cannot, so video no. Just a second, might be a good video. Let's see if this works. It doesn't work. But basically, this is Vitalik talking about why it is a good idea to have this quick iteration and experimentation, and why it is awesome that you can now really easily deploy a contract. You can tweak the crypto economic parameters in such a way that you can actually observe the behavioral changes at network level, which is quite amazing, especially coming from a scientific perspective, to see the impact your choices have. And our 2 minutes. Okay, no demo, looks like. So what we want to do with this approach, in which we have a crypto economic Olympic, is invite as many people as possible to contribute and try to break the model, try to re-break the model, and in the process we reinvent and learn from the mistakes. And hopefully in the process we will start to identify and learn which are the facets, which are the sinks, and which are the parameters that can be tweaked, and the modification of these parameters, how it affects the overall big picture of the crypto economic layer, right? So it's quite a difference, because now people and projects tend to look at cryptocurrencies and tokens as a graph that goes from 0 to the moon. Hopefully this view will prevail. And what we hope is that in this Olympic setup, we will reach an emergent shared understanding. And the beautiful part about this is that once this is a beautiful quote: the mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions. So hopefully just one insight that would, we can learn from this would spread across the ecosystem, improving the whole space in the process. And the bigger picture with Akasha and what we want to do, this is not competing with the big boys, They have billions of users, they have hundreds of billions of dollars and so forth, but this is about having a real alternative in place. It's not about, like a classic paper or plastic bag choice. This is a fundamentally different choice when it comes to our digital sovereignty as human netizens. It's about regaining that control over our collective memory and our collective freedom of expression. And watching history in the making is cool. You just watch a video, you chill, you read a blog post. But what is even cooler is writing the future yourself. And I think what you are doing here as part of this course is you are participating in that process of writing history. And even one of these apps that will result from this hackathon can have ramifications across the whole industry. Just as the homomorphic encryption example was given, that's a big thing. And the aim is, hopefully, to build together in this decade a better knowledge architecture for the next century. And hopefully, in the process, we'll learn that the future is not a place we get to visit, but actually a place we get to create. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihai.
Thank you very much.
You're almost as good as